What's going on YouTube? Mixed by Jocelyn here, back with another video of Mixed Up, and we are in part 2 of my start to finish mixing process where we're mixing I Wanna by Toby and Notes. Today, I'm on top of the moon, I'm not gonna lie. Over the weekend, I found out that a song that I mixed for Notes, funny enough, went platinum, which is my first ever platinum record. So I'm very, very excited about that. And I'm going to be ordering the plaque hopefully today or tomorrow. Once that comes, I'm going to do a special video telling you guys about the story behind that record and how much it's like changed my career, because I think there's some good information in there and some good gems just about the mindset about approaching this industry and making the most of the opportunities given. So, but enough about that. You know, as I said, I'm pretty excited, and I'm going to tell you guys all about that in a future video. So keep an eye out for that. If you've not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button so you can get notified when that video drops. But today, let's get on with part 2 of my process of mixing from start to finish. Boom. Okay, cool. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, you've missed it for whatever reason, the link will be in the description. Go back and watch that because it's important. You know, this is about everything from start to finish, how I approach a mix, how I set my projects up and organize everything from the drum mixes all the way to the vocal mixing. I would highly suggest you obviously watching it in order. In that order? But today we're going to be doing the drum mixing. So in our first video, we organized all of these files. So now we can just open up the drums and we can get started straight away because it's all organized, it's ready. Again, part of the process, it's super important. So what I like to do is I'll find a section of the instrumental that has most of the drums playing. So with this, we're dealing with more loop rather than like individual parts, but you know, we're going to work with what we've got, and we're just going to start blending in the stems and getting that rough sound, and then we're going to be probably adding some parallel compression, EQ and things like that. And I'm going to show you just how little I actually do when it comes to my drums. Less is more, I find, when it comes to stuff like this. So let's get cracking. I'm going to turn this down a little bit so it doesn't bleed into the microphone, and we're going to start mixing. So I'll press play and then I'll get one of the tracks and I will just pull it up to a decent volume. Okay, nice. So about there is good. So you'll see on YouTube lots of things about, you know, oh, get your kick at like -6 or whatever it is. Yeah, I would strongly suggest like those things are helpful and they're not wrong, but also they're not right.
It's true.
It's not true.
Mixing is about your ear, it's about what you feel. So for me personally, I have all of my equipment set up to a point where my speakers are always at one level, my PreSonus is always at one level, my Apollo's always at one level, and then I start at that same place every time. So I know the volume of my room, if you know what I mean. I know how things sound. So I know I listen to Spotify or YouTube or whatever. Comfortably, my PreSonus is set at midday. So like 12 o'clock on a clock face on the dial. And that to me is like the comfortable listening space. So if I know I'm set there and that's where I start listening to the mix, I can gauge from there where things need to be volume wise. What I'm trying to say, long story short, don't pay too much attention to the numbers. It's about the feel. Does it sound good? And is it peaking or not? You know, what you do want to do is make sure that you are leaving headroom whilst you're mixing. So that's sounding good to me. Now, the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to pull up an EQ. For the sake of this video, I'm going to try to stick to plugins that you guys might have. It's not always going to be the case, but we'll use the stock Logic EQ. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a simple top and tail. I'm going to remove any frequencies that I don't think need to be there. Then we're going to move on from there. So straight away, we've got some low end on the kick here. But for me, I find I want to shave off some of that low end. The real low end of that kick is going to be very muddy, it's going to be boomy, and it's not going to be adding the punch that I want from the kick. I can use other instruments like the log drum and the basses later on in the mix to fill that frequency space. So I'm going to probably end up trimming a little bit of this low end out. And what I tend to do is I tend to take away too much, and then I'll just slowly bring it back to where I feel like, oh, we're in a good spot. Okay. So about there is good for me. Taking a bit away, it's going to build us, it's going to give us a little bit of headroom, and we're not really losing any impact of that kick at the same time. Same with the highs, not really much we can take off here. because it's, again, we're dealing with a loop. So maybe just a little sliver, just a little sliver. And now what I'm gonna do, leaving that, my top and tail headroom, I will do that with every single one of my stems, just top and tailing, just making sure that I'm giving myself as much headroom as possible, you know, leaving space and cutting any unnecessary things away. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to get a Pro Q3 up, and I'm gonna listen out for frequencies that I feel that are maybe sticking out a little bit too much in the mix of these drums, and I'm gonna try and tame them a little bit if there's anything there at all. And you'll be able to get a good indication with the Pro Q3. It has a brilliant analyzer on there, and it will poke out frequencies that are pushing well above the rest of them. So you know if you're listening to something and there's something in the mid-range that's poking out, like maybe these two hits that are coming from like one of the claps or the snare hits, we can tame those a little bit and balance it a little bit. And a little trick that I learned with the Pro Q3 is if you hold down the left click button in the purple section, it will turn blue. It basically freezes that analyze, and it will allow you to do multiple dips and cuts and edits with the cue that you need to do. So we'll hold it down, goes blue. And I am just gonna duck these just very slightly, just to give it a little bit of balance so they don't stick out too much, and then a little bit of on that shaker and that hat that's poking out. And I'm gonna leave the kick drum where it is. Okay, nice. Now this is Amapiano music, so it's not kick drum driven, if that makes sense, which is kind of backwards in this day and age. Most songs are like a lot of space being built around the kick, but it's more about the log drum and the shakers and the claps that build the pace of Amapiano. And it was a lesson that I had to learn the hard way, because when I first started mixing Amapiano, I was sending it over in more of like a hip hop head, and I was sending all the drums, like the kicks very loud and stuff, and they were like, no, you're not getting the right vibe. So you have to be conscious of the genres that you're working in as well. Okay, cool. And from there, what I want to do is I want to add just a little bit of like tightness to the low end and a bit more control in the high end. The way that I would approach that is I would probably use a multiband compressor, and I'll use the multiband from FabFilter. I'm going to create a low end band here. And you can see there's a big dip basically around 200. That's where the kick's finishing, and then there's nothing much going on there. So I know that I can like finish my band there, and that's gonna take care of all of the low end for me. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a very fast attack and quite a fast release, which is gonna create like a pumpy compression and hopefully give us a bit of a tighter response to the kick drum. And we'll just get a bit of compression working on that. And then I'm gonna boost it, and I'm just gonna bring out that kick a bit more. And then I can create another band. I'm gonna do quite a wide band because I'm just gonna take everything up until like the highs or the high mids. And I'm gonna add a slightly more slower type of compression, just rounding it off a little bit and balancing it. And then here, I'm gonna add a bit more of an extreme compression. So I'm gonna pull down the range, and I'm gonna make it tight again, just to emphasize the shakers and the hats. Do a little boost on it as well. And then we can A/B this. See how it feels a bit loose? It's not very tame, it's not very controlled. And then when we add it on, everything feels a bit tighter, a bit more controlled. And, you know, just a little bit more of a vibe to it, you know, a little bit more of a knot. So that's sounding good to me. And then from there, what I tend to do is more tidying up stuff as we work through. And then I add color and stuff to the drums as I mix through the rest of the record, knowing the vibe and what I think the record needs. But I'm gonna add 2 buses at this stage. The first bus is gonna be for some parallel compression. Now I really just want the low end to be parallel because I just want a little bit more punch out of that kick. So I'm gonna add an EQ first, and I'm just gonna roll everything off until that like 200 mark, that we could see where the rest of the drums then would kick in. And then I'm going to add another Fab Filter plugin. We're going to use a lot of Fab Filter plugins over this series. So if you haven't invested in them yet, you know, they're amazing plugins and they definitely do a good job. And what we're going to do is for parallel compression, it's just a super compressed, tight version of normal compression or of the sound that you're trying to create. And the reason why we run it in parallel is because I want that feeling of compression, that tightness of compression, but I don't want to mess with the sound itself too much. We've already added a little bit of compression with the multiband, but I just want to add like a really big punch underneath it. So we're going to lower the threshold quite a lot, so we know as soon as the sound comes through, it's going to start hitting. And I'm going to up the ratio to probably around 10 ratio, quite a lot around that number. I'm going to harden the knee because again, we just want it to be very aggressive. It's going to be very quick, the compression, because I want it to grab that kick as soon as it comes in. And we're going to go for quite a fast release as well. And we're going to turn auto gain off. And then we're just going to feed some signal into this bus until we start getting some compression from the kick drum. Now you can see just the kick drum is being reacted there because we added that EQ in. And you can hear we're getting a bit more of a punch from it as well. So if I A/B this. It's just reinforcing that kick. It's going to help it cut through the bass line. It's going to give it its own space and it's going to help with the vibe. But as I said, you know, we don't want to push too much with the kick because this genre isn't kick driven at all. And then we're going to create another bus as well. And this is going to be for later. And it's going to be, again, to help us blend the kick and the bass together. I have a full tutorial on my YouTube channel about this where I use Soothe 2 to basically help blend the kick in with the bass. It removes the harmonics from the bass that the kick is taking up just to give them both space, and that helps build headroom and clarity with the two instruments. So check that out. I'll link it below. Let me know what you think. One of my favorite techniques is a technique I learned from Jason Joshua. But from here, we don't want to add anything onto it. We just want to remove it from the stereo because we don't want to hear it. It's acting as like a side chain. So, and then we'll just feed a bit of signal in there so it's ready to be used and grabbed later on when we need it. Now we're going to get in the next instrument and we're just going to blend again. Solo it so we can hear what it's doing. Okay, so this is more like a top end progression loop that we're adding in, and we're going to approach it in the exact same way for now, and we're just going to solo it and we're going to top and tail it. So again, we've got like a kick drum being added in there. Trim with a bit of the low end. See, we can take some of these highs out. So from around 10K is when we start to hear a noticeable difference. Around 16, 15K, I'm not really hearing any difference. So I'm going to leave it around 15, 16K. And again, we can get another Pro EQ 3 up and see if there's any frequencies that are poking out, like critically listen to this. This kind of skill does take time. It's something that you will develop over time as you train your ear more to what things that are sticking out and being able to like identify issues within the sound. Just a little bump there. A little bump there, gonna play it with the sound. The reason why I'm doing that is I wanna make sure that there's not any like clashing going on. Sometimes when there's two different kicks, they're taking up two different frequencies. It can kind of create like a messy feeling to it. So if that is the case, I would probably just remove one of the kicks entirely and just work with one. But to me, to be honest, everything's sounding good. I don't really want to mess with it too much. Okay. And I'm going to leave that for now. We might come back to it. I'll probably be adding some reverbs, delays, giving it space a bit later. But as I said, right now, I'm just trying to get the overall vibe of the drums mixed in. Okay, so here's like the main punchy snare. This is going to create that rhythm that we're looking for. Okay, again, top and tail. Remove too much. Bringing it back. Okay, so that low end, there's a knock there. If you listen, we're still getting the feeling of that wooden sound. And then that's just bringing that roundness and that warmth to it. I like it and I want it there, but I don't want as much. So I'm just going to get another cue and I'm going to push that down a little bit. Very simple. You know, when you think about EQ in a simple way, it becomes a lot easier to wrap your head around. But I feel like a lot of people overcomplicate, you know, EQing and make it seem a lot more complicated than it actually is. Just bring it back. Want that air in there. About there, we're good. Okay, and let's play that in. Now, sounds like this, you know, these are all samples. They've already been compressed and EQ'd. So like in my head, I'm like, I don't need to do too much to them. You know, a lot of artists, if they see the project, they're like, oh, what am I paying you for? You're barely doing anything. I'm doing what the track needs to sound good. Like there's no point just adding stuff for the sake of it because you feel like you have to do something. It's about making the record sound good at the end of the day. So approach it like that. And this is, you know, this is a sample that's been used loads of times. It's been compressed, it's been EQ'd. You can see the transients are like near enough all the same. So we don't need to add much balance there. It's all really just about leveling at this point. And that's sounding nice. And we're gonna get the shaker in there. For whatever reason, this seems to be mono, which is weird to me. I'm just gonna check. I'm sure it is mono. That is mono. I mean, yeah, shakers, we want a little bit of movement, so I might try to add a little bit of tremolo to it or something just to bring a little bit of movement to it. But we're gonna approach again, and we're just gonna level it in a good place. And now we're gonna solo, and same thing again. See all this low end here? We don't want that, that's bad news. So we're gonna remove all of that stuff. Take too much away, bring it back. About there is good to me. Obviously, again, we don't really need to remove any high. We almost want that high. We want it to sort of shine in that frequency spot. That's what it's there for. So we're going to leave that. And then I am just going to try and add a bit of tremolo to it to see if I can get some movement from it. We'll use the Logic tremolo and we're going to go stereo. So that's too much. Like it's very obvious at that point. But the rhythm is there, how it's moving. So I'm going to keep it smooth and I'm going to lower the depth so it's not going all the way left and right, just a little bit of movement in the center. Like that, that's nice. And then we're going to unsolo. And then I'm going to just drop it down just a little bit. And I'm just going to lower that depth just a little bit more. Just a little bit of movement, just to bring that space. Sounding good. And then we just have these last two frequencies here, which is like a rise and a crash. We're going to mix these in. I just want to feel that impact. I want to feel it coming up. Not too loud, not too quiet. That's sounding good to me. Let's EQ that, top and tail, as always. Probably bring it up to maybe like 400. Bring it back up a little bit. We have taken a little bit of that body out. That's nice. Again, it's a high frequency. It's supposed to be high. I'm going to leave the top as is. And then let's have a look at this crash. Okay, it's more like a stomp. Put the whole space in there. Okay, we're going to EQ that. I'm going to remove some of the low end. I don't think that's necessary. It's not really being heard. Yeah, we're getting the same feeling from it. And I am going to remove some of the highs from that as well. Just because I think it's a little bit too sharp. And I'm going to put a low shelf on it as well. Nice. It was just poking out just a little bit too much. It was a little bit too aggressive for me for the rest of the drums. And I'm going to lower it a couple of dB as well. 1 dB up. Me in the middle. Nice, and then we'll just listen to that as a whole. Nice. Okay. Okay, and then finally with this, I'm gonna just do a little bit of processing on the drum bus. So there's a couple of things, my go-to techniques, and they'll be like on my template. Obviously, we're not using the template for this video because I wanna break down exactly how I'm mixing and why I'm doing certain things. But one of the things that I'll add is a plugin from Waves Factory, Spectre. I like to just add a bit of saturation across the whole board. So this is a saturator and it looks like an EQ, but it basically pulls out harmonics. And I'll grab the top band and I'll pull it all the way back and just give us like maybe 2 dB of like saturation, and then we're going to mix in as well. And you can change here basically what kind of saturation you're going for. So I'm going to go for like a tube saturation, and then we're going to play that, and it's at 50%, so it automatically gives you 50% of the signal processing. So it's sort of like parallel processing it already, but I'm just going to pull it down. I tend to like it around like the 30 mark. A/B it. See how it just brings a bit of life to the drums? Okay, that's sounding nice. And then after that, one thing that I like to put on is, and this is another Jason Joshua technique that I learned, we have the Shadow Hills master bus compressor. I like to put this on my drums, and we're looking for like 1 dB hit on the kick. But again, with this being less kick driven, it might not be that. It might be more like the snare hitting that. And I have a, as you can see here, Jay's preset made already. So you guys can like copy these settings if you like and make your own preset. And we're just gonna play that and see, yep, the kick is floating around that 1 dB. So that to me is a good indication to when I then mix into my master bus, which we'll be going into, is where I know I'm going to be in the right place. My drums are in the right place. That's a good indication for me because I know that's what sounds good and that's what translates. Because at this point in the mix, when I've sort of got my drums on, that's when I start mixing into limiters. And one thing that I have been using, Jason Joshua, again, we're talking about him a lot today, is his plugin, the God Particle. Talking about Jason Joshua a lot, he is the GOAT. You know, he is the one on top of the game right now. So I think you're silly not to be listening and not to be trying his techniques as well. And that's why so much of his style is embedded and entwined into my mix style. Just like you watching me and how I mix and my mix style, taking certain things from it and making your own style out of it is important. So not carbon copying it, but like making it work for your workflow, the things that you like, the things that you don't like. I put this plugin on at this stage, and now I'm going to be mixing into the limiters. Now you've probably heard at some point, you know, oh yeah, don't be mixing into limiters, take the limiters off, da da da. But at the end of the day, the track's going to have a limiter on it. The track's going to have compression. The track's going to have EQ, multiband, all this stuff. At some point, if it's being mastered properly, it's going to be going through these processes. So to me, it makes sense to mix into that so I know how it sounds going in, rather than spending the time creating a brilliant mix, a well-balanced mix, and then I stick a limiter on it and suddenly, oh no, it's doing something weird to my low end. It's doing something weird to this. I'm losing the transients. If you have it there from the jump at this stage, it's going to help you out a lot, and it's going to make mixing the track a lot easier. Sometimes I will literally just print the record with the God Particle on and maybe some other things in the stereo bus, which we'll go into later on in the series. And then sometimes I might take it off and remaster it again, just whatever sounds best for the record, you know, or maybe I'm working with another mastering engineer on this record and he doesn't want any of that stuff on, so I take it off and I send it to him. But it's all about the process and making sure that it sounds good going in, because this is how it's going to sound when it gets released to the public. So I turn it on and I don't run it at 100%. I'm normally running it about 70%. This is basically like a multi-band sort of thing. It's balancing, it's Jason Joshua's ear, it's his curve, it's like what he thinks sounds good. But what I like to do is have a good indication here of where we're at, and I like the way that he has these 2 bands set up. The pi setup it was a polarizing topic when I did the video on the God Particle. Some people saying it works right, but to me it doesn't seem to work right. But having the low end and the high end hitting those indications is a good place for me to know, okay, right, I'm in the right space to work into getting the most and the best out of this plugin. So now we've got that set up. Obviously it gets a lot louder because it's being limited now, but it's a good indication of where we're at here. I tend to just turn this down a few dB running into it, so I'm not like pushing the limiter straight away, and then I can balance later on in the mix. You know, we don't have much mid-range at the moment, so that's not going to be hitting there until we get in some of those more mid-range instruments and vocals. But the low end's hitting in the right space, it's starting to flick in there. so we know we're sort of roughly in the right place. So that is basically quite fast, so I apologize, but obviously I do have videos on all these techniques on my channel as well. But that's sort of like where we'll be at for the first stage of the drum mixing. From there, I'll be going on to mixing the bass line in and making it work with the drums. And then as we then mix through the track, I'll be flicking more back and forward from the drums to the instruments, vocals, XYZ, and it gets a little bit more complicated. But like, this is why we have the template set up. This is why we have everything there, so we can clearly see where we're at in the project. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, and I'm sure you guys do, leave them in the comments below, or feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. I'm always on my Instagram and I'm always replying to people on there. It's Mixed by Jocelyn on Instagram. If you've liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you've got any questions, as I said, leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, as we're releasing videos weekly. And this is going to be part of a probably 5-part series on this. And as I said as well, big pat on the back for me for going platinum. And I'll be making a video all about me going platinum and the story behind it coming very, very soon. So I'll catch you guys later. Peace.